Please, take it." The morning had barely begun, yet the city was already buzzing with life. Cars honking, vendors shouting their prices, people rushing to work with coffee in one hand and phones in the other. But in the middle of all that noise, the world felt strangely quiet for Daniel, a homeless man who had grown used to being unseen. He sat on the cold pavement near a busy intersection, watching the river of footsteps flow past him. Everyone looked straight ahead, never down, as though acknowledging his presence would cost them too much time or too much heart. Daniel's hands were rough, his clothes worn thin by the biting winter wind. But despite his appearance, his eyes still carried a gentleness, a softness that the world had failed to crush. He reached into his pocket and pulled out everything he owned, a single crumpled dollar bill, $1, his last. He held it between his fingers for a long moment, staring at it as if it were both a lifeline and a goodbye. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. A warm sandwich from the nearby food stall cost $2, twice what he had. But even a small packet of crackers or a cheap drink would make the hunger bearable. He stood up slowly, joints aching, and began walking toward the stall. The smell of grilled bread and warm soup filled the air, and for a moment he closed his eyes, savoring it. But then something else caught his attention. A faint sound, a sniffle, a small voice trying to hold back tears. Daniel turned his head. Just a few feet away, near a wooden bench, stood a little girl, maybe 7, maybe younger. Her clothes were old but clean, her hair tied in a loose ponytail. Her cheeks were red, not from the cold, but from crying. In front of her sat a small paper cup with only a few coins inside. Daniel approached slowly, not wanting to frighten her. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you all right?" The girl wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm okay," she whispered, though it was clear she wasn't. Daniel knelt down to her level. "Where's your mom?" The girl pointed at a pharmacy across the street. "She's inside. She's sick," her voice cracked. "We don't have money for her medicine." Daniel looked at the cup. A few coins. Maybe 50 cents total. Nowhere near enough. "How much more do you need?" he asked. She shrugged helplessly. "The lady said the medicine costs a lot. Mom told me to wait outside and see if someone could help. But nobody wants to stop." Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. Not pity, but recognition. He had seen that look, fear mixed with helplessness, on his own daughter's face years ago, when life took a cruel turn. He glanced down at the dollar in his hand. His last chance at food. His last bit of comfort in a world that had already taken so much from him. But as he looked back at the small girl, shivering and scared, something inside him made the choice for him. Kindness. He slowly reached out the dollar. "Here," he said with a gentle smile. "Take it." The girl's eyes widened. "But this is yours." Daniel shook his head. "It's yours now. Your mom needs it more than I do." She hesitated, looking at the bill as though it were something precious and unbelievable. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "Maybe not," Daniel replied. "But I know what it feels like when no one helps." The girl took the dollar carefully, as though afraid it might disappear. Her bottom lip trembled. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're really kind." Daniel smiled, though hunger gnawed at him. "I'll be okay," he said. "You make sure your mom gets better." She nodded and clutched the dollar tightly before running back toward the pharmacy, her small footsteps full of hope. Daniel watched her go, then slowly turned away, his stomach empty but his heart strangely full. The world might not have given him much, but it had not taken away his humanity. Little did he know. Someone had seen everything. Someone who would change his life forever. Daniel walked away slowly, his hands tucked inside his thin jacket, trying to fight the sharp wind cutting through the street like broken glass. His empty stomach complained loudly, but he didn't regret giving his last dollar to the little girl. In fact, for the first time in days, he felt peaceful. But he had no idea that his small act of kindness had already touched someone he didn't even notice. Across the street, inside a sleek black car parked near the corner, sat Michael Carter, a man whose presence usually commanded attention. He was in his early 40s, clean-shaven, in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than everything Daniel had owned in the last 10 years. Michael was a successful businessman, known more for his sharp decisions than for any soft-hearted gestures. His day was scheduled down to the minute. Meetings, calls, contracts, deals. He didn't have time for emotions, at least that's what he always told himself. But today his routine was broken. His driver had stepped away for a few minutes, leaving him waiting in the car. And from the window, Michael happened to witness the entire exchange between Daniel and the little girl. At first, Michael thought the homeless man was asking for money. Instead, he watched Daniel give money. And not just any money, the last dollar he had. Michael leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Why would he do that? He murmured. He watched Daniel walk away without expecting anything. No applause, no attention, no camera recording him. He simply gave and left. Michael felt his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't irritation, it was curiosity. Something inside him whispered, "Follow him." He stepped out of the car, ignoring the cold breeze that hit his face. As Daniel walked down the sidewalk, Michael stayed behind, observing quietly. Daniel moved slowly, not because he was unsure of where to go, but because his body was tired. He paused at a trash can and picked up an empty bottle someone had thrown near it. Then he straightened a pile of fallen newspapers blocking the path. Michael frowned. He had seen plenty of homeless people in his city. Some were aggressive, some were desperate, many were invisible. But this man, he didn't blend into the noise. He stood out, not by what he had, but by what he gave, even in his brokenness. Michael crossed the street, still keeping a distance. Daniel walked past a bus stop where an elderly man struggled to stand up. Without hesitation, Daniel stepped forward, offering both hands. "Easy, sir," Daniel said gently. "Don't rush." Michael watched as the man smiled gratefully. "Thank you." "Son," the old man said. Daniel nodded, then continued. Michael felt something uncomfortable rise in him. Guilt, shame, maybe both. He had built an empire on efficiency and productivity, but in all that success he had forgotten how to see people, how to care, how to feel. His father used to tell him, "A man is not measured by what he earns, but by what he gives." He had heard those words 100 times, but now watching Daniel, they finally made sense. He followed Daniel for several more minutes, until Daniel walked behind a convenience store and sat near a dumpster, pulling out a piece of cardboard to rest on. Michael didn't come closer yet. He just stood there, hands in pockets, watching a man who had nothing, but acted as if he had everything a good heart required. A drop of cold rain landed on Michael's cheek. He blinked up at the darkening sky. His driver's voice suddenly called from behind. "Sir, the car is ready. Shall we go?" Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept staring at Daniel. "No," he finally said. "I want to talk to him." The driver looked surprised. Michael wasn't the kind of man who changed plans. But today, something had shifted. Michael walked toward Daniel slowly. Each step felt heavier, not because of fear, but because he felt unprepared. Emotion wasn't something he handled well anymore. As he got closer, Daniel looked up sharply, alarmed. People in suits rarely approached him, and if they did, it was rarely for something good. "I'm not bothering anyone," Daniel stammered, standing up quickly. Michael raised a hand. "No, you're not. I just wanted to talk." Daniel blinked, confused. Michael glanced at the cardboard. "Do you mind if I sit?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. And with that, something unusual happened. A billionaire sat beside a homeless man on the cold ground behind a grocery store. And for the first time in years, Michael felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Little did Daniel know, this conversation would change everything. The sky dimmed slowly, turning the city into a blend of orange, purple, and deep blue. Lights flickered on one by one as the day folded into night. To most people, evening meant going home, eating dinner, and resting. But for Daniel, night meant survival. The temperature dropped sharply as cold air crept between the buildings. Daniel wrapped his thin jacket around himself, but the fabric was so worn it hardly made a difference. He moved behind the grocery store, the only place he felt safe enough to lay his head. There, among discarded boxes and the hum of the store's generator, he spread out the flattened cardboard he used as a bed. It wasn't soft, It wasn't warm, but it was his space, his small corner of the world. As Daniel sat down, exhaustion poured through him. His body ached from walking all day, his stomach clenched with hunger, but despite everything, his mind drifted back to the little girl, her teary eyes, her trembling voice, her mother waiting inside the pharmacy. Had they gotten the medicine? Had she made it in time? He hoped so. That thought warmed him more than the threadbare jacket ever could. Just as he leaned his head back against the wall, he heard footsteps approaching. Sharp, steady, purposeful. Daniel tensed. Nighttime footsteps usually meant trouble, drunk, strangers, angry teenagers, or people who thought kicking a homeless man made them powerful. He sat up straight and raised his hands slightly. "I'm not causing trouble," he said cautiously. "I'm just resting here. I'll move if you want." But the man stepped into the dim light, and Daniel recognized his face. The well-dressed stranger who had followed him earlier. Michael Carter. Daniel blinked in confusion. "Sir, why are you here?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He looked around the dim alley, the scattered trash, the cold concrete where Daniel slept every night. He had seen poverty before, but seeing it up close like this shook something deep inside him. Finally, he spoke. "I wanted to talk to you, properly." Daniel frowned. "About what?" Michael held out a small paper bag. "Dinner," he said softly. "I brought you a warm meal." Daniel stared at it like it was something magical. His hands trembled slightly as he accepted the bag. You didn't have to do this." "I know," Michael replied, "but I wanted to." Daniel opened the bag carefully. The warmth hit his face and tears nearly filled his eyes. A warm sandwich, fresh fries, even a small bottle of water. It felt like a feast. He took a bite, slowly, gratefully, as though he wanted to savor every moment. Michael sat down beside him on the ground, ignoring the cold concrete beneath his expensive suit. Daniel looked at him like he was from another world. "No offense, sir," Daniel said, swallowing, "but people like you don't usually sit with people like me." Michael smiled faintly. Maybe that's the problem. Daniel didn't know how to respond. After a moment, Michael asked gently, "Why did you give your last dollar to that girl today?" Daniel paused, staring at the sandwich in his hands. "Because kindness doesn't belong to the rich," he said quietly. "Anyone can give it." Michael felt something tug at him. Most people would have said something grand, dramatic, or attention-seeking, but Daniel said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. "What's your story?" Michael asked. "If you don't mind sharing." Daniel exhaled slowly, his breath fogged in the cold air. "It's not a happy one," he warned. "I still want to hear it." Daniel nodded. "I used to have a job. Construction work, hard work, but it paid enough. I had a family, a daughter. Beautiful girl, loved to draw." His eyes softened with memory. "But then there was an accident at the site. I got injured, couldn't work for months. Bills piled up, medical expenses, rent." He swallowed hard. "We lost the apartment. My wife took our daughter and left to stay with her family. I didn't blame them. I had nothing left to offer." Silence hung between them. Michael felt a heaviness in his chest. It was rare to meet someone who had truly lost everything and still remained kind. "You've been on the streets since then?" Michael asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Been trying to find work, but it's hard. No address, no clean clothes, no chances." Michael looked down. In his world, people had endless chances. In Daniel's world, a single bad turn could destroy everything. For the first time, Michael realized how unfair life could be, not by money but by opportunity. He took a deep breath. "Daniel," he said, "I'm not here just to talk. I'm here because what you did today reminded me of something I lost." Daniel tilted his head. "What did you lose?" Michael looked up at the dark sky. "My humanity." And in that quiet moment, the cold alley didn't feel so cold anymore. Two men, one with everything, one with nothing, sat side by side, connected by something deeper than circumstance. Little did Daniel know. This night was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring a miracle he never expected. Morning sunlight crept between the tall buildings, warming the cold sidewalks and bringing life back to the city. People hurried through the streets with coffee cups, briefcases, and headphones, each living in their own bubble. But today something unusual caught their attention. A homeless man, walking beside a billionaire. Daniel followed Michael through the busy street, unsure of each step he took. His clothes were mismatched, his jacket worn thin, and his shoes had holes in the soles. In contrast, Michael's polished shoes reflected the sunlight like mirrors. They looked like two people from different universes, and they were. When they reached a small cafe on the corner, Michael opened the door. "Come in," he said gently. Daniel froze. He had walked past this cafe 100 times. The warm smell of coffee and fresh pastries always tempted him, but he never dared to enter. People inside weren't used to seeing men like him. "Sir, I don't think this is a good idea," Daniel whispered. "Why not?" Michael asked. "Look at me." Daniel spread his hands. "I don't want to embarrass you." Michael stepped closer. "Daniel, if anyone should be embarrassed, it's those who judge a person by their clothes." Daniel hesitated a few seconds longer, then followed him inside. The moment they walked in, the room fell silent. Heads turned. A couple whispered. A man raised an eyebrow. The cashier stiffened slightly. Daniel lowered his eyes, wishing he could disappear. But Michael stood tall, ignoring every look. "1 table for 2, he said. The waitress nodded awkwardly and led them to a booth near the window. Michael sat comfortably. Daniel sat carefully, as if afraid his presence might damage the furniture. When the waitress returned, Michael handed her the menus and said, "Bring him anything he wants. And bring 2 of everything." Her eyebrows shot up. She wasn't used to a wealthy man speaking so kindly about someone who looked like Daniel. She gave a quiet nod and hurried away. Daniel looked around nervously. "Everyone is staring. Let them stare," Michael replied. "Maybe it'll teach them something." Daniel offered a small, shy smile. When their food arrived, warm pancakes, eggs, toast, and steaming coffee, Daniel stared at the plates as though they were gold. He lifted the fork slowly, almost reverently. "You can eat, you know," Michael chuckled gently. Daniel took a bite, and instantly tears filled his eyes. "I haven't had a proper breakfast in months," he whispered. Michael felt the words hit him like a punch. He watched Daniel eat with gratitude, with humility, with the kind of joy most people forgot how to feel. Halfway through the meal, Michael softly asked, "Daniel, what happened? How did life bring you here?" Daniel wiped his mouth and took a deep breath. "I used to have a family, a job, a normal life," he began. "I worked construction. Hard worker, never complained. I loved coming home and seeing my little girl run into my arms." His eyes softened. "She used to draw pictures for me every night, said she was going to be an artist." A pause, a heavy one. Then the accident happened. A collapse at the site. I was lucky to survive, but my back was never the same. Couldn't work. Bills piled up. Rent went unpaid. His voice cracked. I watched everything fall apart, slowly, painfully. We lost our home. And when you have nothing left, people treat you like nothing. Michael felt a lump in his throat. He had built his empire by pushing himself, but he had never imagined what it felt like to be pushed down by life itself. "What about your family?" Michael asked softly. Daniel looked out the window. "My wife took our daughter to stay with her parents. She said she needed stability. I couldn't blame her. She was right. They deserved better than a broken man." Silence embraced the table. Michael didn't try to comfort Daniel with empty words. Instead, he listened, something Daniel wasn't used to. When Daniel finally looked at him again, Michael's expression held no pity. "Only respect." "Daniel," Michael said, "you've been through hell, and yet you're still kind. You gave your last dollar to a stranger's child. Most people wouldn't even give a penny." Daniel lowered his eyes. "When you've lost everything, you learn what truly matters." Michael leaned back, astonished. He had spent years closing deals, building wealth, chasing success. Yet this man, sitting across from him with old clothes and rough hands, had more humanity than most of the powerful people he met daily. "People like you," Michael whispered, "are rare." Daniel shook his head. "I'm nothing special." Michael's eyes stayed locked on him. "Yes," he said quietly. "You are." What Daniel didn't know was that this breakfast, this conversation, was about to open a door he thought had been closed forever. The cafe door chimed softly as Michael and Daniel stepped outside, the warm smell of coffee fading behind them. The sky was clearer now, brushed with soft morning light. People walked past without noticing the silent transformation happening between two men who came from opposite worlds. Daniel wiped his hands nervously on his pants. "Thank you again for the breakfast," he said quietly. "It was more than a meal. It felt like a piece of my old life." Michael smiled gently. "You deserve more than a meal, Daniel." Daniel didn't know how to respond. Compliments still felt foreign to him, almost painful. For years he'd been overlooked, ignored, or treated like an inconvenience. Kindness was something he rarely received, and when he did, it felt almost too heavy to hold. As they walked down the busy street, Michael seemed lost in thought. Daniel assumed their time together had come to an end. Maybe the businessman was simply being generous for a day, a moment of goodwill, a soft reminder that the world wasn't entirely cold. But just when Daniel began to slow, preparing to say goodbye, Michael suddenly stopped walking. "Come with me," he said. Daniel blinked. "Where?" "To my office." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "Sir, I don't think people at your office would want someone like me walking around." Michael faced him fully. "Daniel, if anyone has a problem with you being there, that problem will be with me, not with you." Those words held more weight than Daniel could understand. Reluctantly, he followed. Michael's company building towered above the surrounding streets, tall, dark glass, shimmering like polished stone. The automatic doors opened silently, and cool air rushed into Daniel's face. Everything felt expensive, sharp, clean, intimidating. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity. Employees in suits walked briskly, holding files and tablets, greeting each other with polite nods. The receptionist typed quickly, her manicure perfect, her hair tied neatly. And then Daniel stepped inside. The lobby seemed to freeze. People glanced at him, some quickly, others not so subtly, some with confusion, some with judgment, some with curiosity. Daniel instinctively kept his eyes on the floor. His heart raced. He imagined the whispers. What's he doing here? Who let him in? Is he lost? But Michael walked beside him confidently, ignoring every stare. When they reached the reception desk, the receptionist smiled warmly at Michael until her eyes shifted to Daniel. Her smile faltered. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said. "Is everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," Michael replied. "Daniel is with me." Her eyes widened slightly. She nodded, though confusion remained. Daniel felt his face burn with embarrassment. He didn't belong here. Everything inside him screamed that he should turn around and leave. But Michael placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Come," he said. "There's something I want to talk to you about." They walked past glass-walled offices, conference rooms, and elegant artwork. Daniel had never been inside a building like this. His shoes made soft scraping noises on the polished floors, reminding him of how out of place he was. When they finally reached Michael's office, Daniel stepped inside with hesitation. The room was large and bright, with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. The desk was organized, not cluttered, and a small plant sat in the corner, alive and well cared for. "Sit," Michael said kindly. Daniel sank into the chair, feeling smaller than ever. Michael walked around his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder. He placed it gently in front of Daniel. Daniel looked at it but didn't touch it. "What's this?" he asked softly. Michael took a slow breath. "Daniel, I want to offer you a job." Daniel stared at him, certain he misheard. A job? For me?" "Yes," Michael said. "For you." Daniel's breath caught. His eyes darted to the folder, then back to Michael. "Sir, I don't think I'm qualified for anything here. I don't have nice clothes. I don't have a resume. I don't even have a place to shower every day." Michael held up a hand, stopping him. "Daniel, you have something far more valuable than a resume." "What's that?" Daniel asked, voice trembling. "Integrity, kindness, character, the kind of person who gives away his last dollar." To help a child he doesn't even know is exactly the kind of person I want in my company. Daniel's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but emotion clogged every word. Michael, no one has trusted me in years. Well, Michael said with a small smile, I'm trusting you now. Daniel finally opened the folder. Inside was a simple contract, an offer for a stable job in the maintenance department, regular hours, a monthly paycheck, benefits, a chance to rebuild his life, and at the bottom, Michael's signature. Daniel's hands shook violently. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. I can't accept this, he whispered. Why not? Michael asked. Because it's too much. I don't deserve this, I'm just... Daniel, Michael interrupted firmly, you gave your last dollar to save a little girl. If that doesn't make you deserving, I don't know what does. Silence. Then Daniel pressed the contract to his chest, tears falling freely. For the first time in years, someone believed in him. And that belief was about to change everything. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind in Daniel's life. Soft, slow and beautiful, like the first rays of morning sunlight after a long, merciless night. From the first day he stepped into Michael's company, clutching his new badge with trembling hands, Daniel felt a strange mix of nervousness and overwhelming gratitude. He had never been inside a building so clean, so bright, so full of people who smiled at him without judgment. His role in the maintenance department was simple, but to him it meant everything. Every mop stroke, every bulb he replaced, every toolbox he lifted, felt like proof that he belonged. Proof that he was no longer the forgotten man on a cold sidewalk. Proof that he had finally been given a chance to stand again. And he didn't waste a second of it. Daniel arrived before sunrise every morning, greeting security guards by name, holding doors for interns carrying stacks of files, and offering warm smiles to employees who passed him in the hallway. Within weeks, the entire building knew him, not as the maintenance man, but as Daniel, the kind soul who never seemed to stop giving. People adored him. They loved the way he remembered birthdays, the way he helped elderly employees carry their bags, the way he asked everyone how their day was going, and somehow made them feel like he truly cared. And Michael often stood at his office window on the 12th floor, watching Daniel sweep the lobby or fix a loose railing. Every time a proud smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. To Michael, Daniel wasn't just an employee. He was a living reminder of everything the world had tried to make him forget. Humanity, compassion, and the quiet power of kindness. But life had one more miracle waiting. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon. Sunlight poured into the lobby through the glass doors, painting the marble floors in warm golden streaks. Daniel had just finished fixing a loose vent and was wiping his hands when the receptionist suddenly rushed into Michael's office. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement. "Sir, you won't believe this," she said, breathless. "Someone is here to see Daniel." Michael raised his eyebrows. "Someone for Daniel? Who?" She shook her head. I think you should let him see them." Michael nodded. "Send him." Moments later, the intercom buzzed. "Daniel, please come to the front lobby," the receptionist announced. Daniel wiped his hands on his work pants, confused. Visitors for him? He couldn't remember the last time anyone had come looking for him. He made his way toward the lobby, his footsteps echoing softly. As he reached the large open space, he spotted two small figures standing near the reception desk, a woman and a little girl. Daniel froze mid-step. His breath caught. The little girl. The one who had dropped her ice cream, the one he'd given his last dollar to. The tiny spark of innocence who had unknowingly changed his life. She looked healthier now, rosy cheeks, bright eyes, hair brushed neatly into a ponytail. Her mother stood beside her with trembling hands pressed to her heart. Before Daniel could speak, the little girl ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Daniel," she squealed. "I missed you." His throat tightened. "Lily, you look so much better." Her mother approached with tears brimming in her eyes. She placed a gentle hand on Daniel's arm. "You saved us," she whispered. Daniel blinked, stunned. "Saved you? I only gave her $1. The mother shook her head, her voice shaking with emotion. "That dollar helped me buy the medicine she needed that day. The pharmacy wouldn't give it to me unless I had the full amount." I was short, exactly $1. A tear slipped down Daniel's cheek. She grabbed his hands and held them tightly. Your $1 saved her life. Lily nodded enthusiastically. Mommy said you're our hero. Daniel swallowed hard. The lobby fell silent around them. Employees nearby stopped walking, touched by the emotional scene unfolding in front of them. He gently knelt and hugged the little girl. You don't owe me anything, he said softly. But the mother shook her head, crying harder now. No, Daniel. We owe you everything. That single act of kindness brought my daughter back to me. Just then, Daniel felt a presence behind him. He turned slightly. Michael stood there, watching with glistening eyes. And in that moment, Daniel realized something deep and powerful. Sometimes blessings don't come wrapped in money, comfort, or opportunity. Sometimes they come wrapped in tiny hands, in moments of gratitude, in reminders that even the smallest action can create miracles. That's when it truly hit him. His life hadn't just changed. His heart had changed others. And this was only the beginning of his new story. Michael stood quietly in the hallway, half hidden behind the door as he watched Ethan and Daniel speak. He had stopped by the diner only to check on a business renovation nearby, but what he witnessed instead shook him deeply. He saw Ethan, this fragile man with tired eyes and a humble posture, embrace Daniel with pure gratitude. He saw Lily tugging gently on Ethan's sleeve, telling him she'd saved him a chocolate chip cookie. And he saw Daniel stepping back, wiping a tear, looking at Ethan as though he were a long-lost brother. Michael wasn't a man easily moved. He had spent decades in the corporate world, surrounded by people who chased numbers, power, and titles. Emotional moments were rare, but something about the sincerity unfolding in front of him pierced straight through the armor he had built around his heart. He stood there silent, unnoticed, as he watched Daniel walk Ethan outside, his hand resting gently on the man's shoulder. Ethan held the letter tightly, the key still shining in his palm under the afternoon sun. Michael felt something he hadn't felt in years. Warmth, faith. A belief that goodness still existed in a world that often seemed drowned in selfishness and greed. He swallowed hard, stepped back, and left the diner without saying a word. But his mind was racing. That evening, after hours of thinking, pacing, and reflecting, Michael made a decision. He called his secretary and asked her to prepare something immediately. The next morning he arrived early at his office, earlier than he had in months. He sat at his desk, staring at a simple folder she had placed there, a folder he had specifically requested. He put his hand over it. It felt right. It felt necessary. It felt deserved. At exactly 2 p.m., he sent for Daniel. Daniel knocked lightly before entering, unaware that his life was about to change. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" he asked, standing near the door, a little nervous. Michael rarely summoned employees personally, especially not for casual matters. "Yes, Daniel," Michael said, rising from his chair and walking around the desk to face him directly. "Come in. Have a seat." Daniel sat, trying to read Michael's expression. The man looked serious but not cold. Not today. Michael took a slow breath. "I saw what you did yesterday," he began softly. "With the homeless man, with Ethan." Daniel's eyes widened. You saw that?" Michael nodded, his face softening. "I saw everything." Daniel swallowed hard, unsure what to say. "You didn't do it for attention," Michael continued. "You weren't pretending. You genuinely cared for him." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "He reminded me of myself, sir." "I just couldn't walk away." Michael smiled faintly. "Exactly." He walked to his desk and picked up the folder. "I have something for you," he said, his tone gentle but full of weight. He slid the folder across the desk. Daniel blinked, confused. He opened it slowly. What he saw made his breath hitch. Inside was a contract, clean, official, crisp, with clear terms written in bold ink. His eyes scanned quickly, his hands trembling as he read. A new position, a higher salary, more than he ever dreamed of. Medical benefits for his family, job security. And at the bottom, a housing offer, a small but beautiful apartment owned by the company, fully furnished, with the first 2 years paid for by the company. Daniel's hand flew to his mouth. His lips quivered. Tears gathered instantly, falling before he could stop them. He choked on his breath, unable to speak. Why me?" he whispered, voice breaking. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for Daniel's shaky breaths. Michael walked toward him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Because, Daniel," he said softly, "the world desperately needs people like you." Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. "But I didn't do anything special. I just helped a man who needed help." "That's exactly what makes it special," Michael replied. "In a world full of people only looking after themselves, you chose to see someone invisible. You chose compassion when most people would have walked away." Daniel lowered his head, tears dripping onto the folder. Michael continued, his voice deep with emotion. "You reminded me of something I had forgotten," he said, "something I lost years ago." Daniel looked up, blinking through tears. "What is that, sir?" Michael smiled softly. "Faith." The word hung in the room like a warm light. Daniel covered his face, sobbing openly now, sobs of relief, disbelief, and gratitude. For so many years he had worked quietly, humbly, never expecting recognition, never waiting for miracles. But life had given him one anyway. Michael let him cry, giving him time, giving him grace. When Daniel finally lifted his head, he whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." Michael stepped back, hands in his pockets, watching the man before him. "You earned this," he said, "not through ambition, not through competition, but through kindness." Daniel held the contract to his chest as if it were the most precious thing he had ever been given. And maybe, in that moment, it was. Months passed, and Daniel's life transformed in ways he had once thought impossible. The small apartment that had once seemed like a distant dream became a sanctuary, a place where he could finally rest, eat without worry, and sleep under warm blankets that didn't smell of damp or despair. Each morning he woke up with a sense of purpose, not just to survive, but to live. His job at Michael's company became more than employment. It became a platform to show integrity, dedication, and the same kindness he had offered to strangers for years. Daniel arrived early, stayed late when needed, and treated everyone with respect. His co-workers, initially skeptical of the quiet, humble man in worn clothes, began to notice the difference he brought to the workplace. It wasn't just that he worked hard, it was that he genuinely cared. Yet despite the improvements in his life, Daniel never forgot where he had come from. Every weekend he returned to the streets that had once been his home, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. He volunteered at shelters, prepared meals, and shared supplies with people who reminded him of himself. He saw in their eyes the same exhaustion, the same hopelessness, the same longing for a helping hand. And he gave it freely, without expecting anything in return. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the buildings and painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, Daniel stood outside the local shelter, arranging donated blankets in neat piles. Laughter and chatter echoed from inside, warm and comforting. He smiled softly, watching children run past, giggling as volunteers handed them food. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "You know," Michael said, stepping beside him, his hands tucked in the pockets of his coat. He was older now in Daniel's eyes, though no less commanding. There was a warmth in his gaze, a softness reserved only for moments of genuine human connection. Daniel looked up, brushing his hands on his jacket. "Good evening, sir." Michael's eyes followed the children laughing inside the shelter. "All of this," he began quietly, "happened because of one simple choice. $1. Daniel shook his head gently. "No, it didn't start with the dollar." His voice was calm but carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "It happened because someone believed in me. Someone took a chance when I had nothing to offer but my honesty and my heart." Michael smiled, a faint glimmer of pride in his eyes. "And I always will," he said. Daniel looked back toward the shelter doors as they swung open. Volunteers ushered in more children and families, and laughter poured into the cool evening air. The sound was musical, joyful, almost magical, It reminded him of the days he had spent in hunger and cold, the days when he had almost forgotten what happiness felt like. For a long moment, neither spoke. Both men simply watched as the world unfolded before them. The little acts of service, the care being shared, the smiles that could melt even the coldest hearts. Daniel's mind wandered briefly to the girl he had given his last $1 to months ago. Had she grown? Was her mother well? Had his small act truly made a difference? And then he realized something profound. The ripple of kindness he had started had grown in ways he could not have predicted. What began as one selfless gesture had created a chain of hope that touched lives far beyond his own. Michael broke the silence, his voice soft but firm. You know, Daniel, most people go through life thinking their actions are too small to matter. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity. But you proved that even the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Daniel smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that he had learned the greatest lesson of all. It wasn't wealth, a status or power that could change lives. It was the courage to give, to help, to believe in others, even when you yourself had so little. As the sun fully set and the city lights blinked awake, Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in years, he didn't worry about the past. He didn't